Welcome to part 5 of Court Chronicles, 74 flights, 46 countries, 1 year, Cameron Mofid's journey across the globe. I'm your host, Alex Gruskin, and of course, as I say at the start of each one of these episodes, season 2 of the Inside Out podcast is going to focus on some of the stories that happen when you are a member of the tennis community, how that can enhance just the experiences you have throughout your life, no matter where you are. Tennis is one of those few international sports, and as such, there's an international language associated with it that can connect you with fellow tennis fans, no matter where you are in the globe, no matter what your background may be. And again, that's what's made in doing the second season so enjoyable. And joining me as he has all season long for part 5, the man whose journey we are exploring and going along with, Cameron Mofid. Cameron, welcome back to the show again. 5 months on the road. I believe it was 5 months on the road in total, correct? I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah, it's we're getting to the midway point, I guess, of my travels. We're in June now, end of May, beginning of June, and I've just gotten back from the Middle East, from Jerusalem and from Tel Aviv, and so back in Miami, trying to recharge the batteries and ready for this next set of adventures.
Yeah, I'm going to save a lot of these questions for the end of part 10 when we're doing a big recap. But if you had to say your favorite cuisine from any part of your journey, which would you pick?
Favorite country?
Favorite cuisine in any country.
Favorite cuisine. Oh, that's a tough one. I would say my favorite cuisine would be in.
Because I could eat fresh hummus and falafel in Israel each and every day and be happy with it.
We're gonna go part 8, I believe it is.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm in on that. I can definitely get behind that, but I'm sure you had a lot of good choices. And again, just a reminder for all of you listeners, Cameron, who started off at the Sanchez Casal Academy that founded Legends United, which in association with the Nick Kyrgios Foundation raised money by selling tennis memorabilia for various charities across the globe. We are on your pre-college journey. You take the time to travel across the globe, again, get some experiences before you head off to college, before you try to figure out what you want to do with your life. But of course, what you kept noticing along the journey, tennis, no matter where you went, inevitably came up. And, so for you, you traveled to, I believe, as we left off, you were in the Middle East, you were in Israel. From there, I believe we are next heading to South America with your friend Alex, who, as you mentioned, you met along the way in Israel. And I know that wasn't through tennis, but to get to travel now with a buddy that we've picked up along the way, does that add to the experience?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I met Alex only for a few hours. I really only knew him for a few hours, but we really clicked. He was such a great guy, and he said he had never been to South America. I hadn't been. I'd been there when I was a kid, but I hadn't been on this set of adventures. And so we wound up. He went from Jordan to Prague, which is where he was based out of. Australian guy, but he was in Prague. I went back to Miami, and we pretty much just booked this trip around South America and in Cuba and Mexico. And so we wind up booking our trip 2 weeks later, after 2 weeks removed from our time in Jordan. I went to Guatemala by myself just to visit a friend of mine, Joaquin. I went to an ITF junior tournament he was playing. He's an unbelievable player. He'll be going to school in Michigan as well, school next year. But yeah, just supported him in his matches. We had some crazy times going out. His brother got lost in Guatemala, which was a bit of an issue. But Alex and I wound up in Buenos Aires, just about 2 weeks after Jordan.
Yeah. Again, I think when you look at the course of your journey, it's those sorts of little details. The fact that you meet a friend along the way who you're now planning the next portion of your trip with, that's got to be so exciting. So you take 8 days off in Miami. I imagine you're doing a lot of sleeping, a lot of recovering, just trying to get any sorts of semblance of normalcy back into your life. But from there, you head directly to Guatemala, and you got an interesting message when you got there. You were told to avoid the perilous white taxis, as you describe in your diary. And again, for our listeners who want to read that diary, you can find it on our website. You want to see some of the photos, the videos we discuss, you can find them on our YouTube channel along with each of these episodes. But describe the white taxis for our listeners who might not be acquainted.
Yeah, so I get there, and Joaquin warned me. He said, "Don't take the white taxis before." And I guess those are like kind of the unofficial taxis. But I mean, here I said, I take Uber all the time, whatever. I get out of the airport and I see a white taxi, and I was like, "All right, what's up? Let's go." I give him the address, and we get to the gate, and the guard is kind of scared, and he's like, "You cannot come in here." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You're in a white taxi." And the driver's like, like everything's safe. Don't worry. Like, I'm a certified driver or whatever. Speaking in Spanish, I speak, so I understood. And so the guy, this armed guard with like a machine gun, literally comes in the car with us, like inside, and drives with us to my friend's building. So I was like, that's weird. And then Joaquin starts freaking out on me. He's like, "You cannot take those. Like, you'll die, whatever. They'll kill you. Take your wallet." I said, "All right, whatever." And so then as we're driving by, I kind of realized on every corner, there's like a young man with a machine gun. Like, I guess there's security. And so that's when I kind of realized that South America, or Central America, South America was a little bit of a different monster. And so, yeah, I mean, just in between, we went to a volcano. We had, as I spoke in the memoir, a 10-year-old guide who showed us around Pacaya, which was awesome. I mean, the kid had a machete, which was like half the size of his body, to cut off snakes. And it was an adventure in itself. And supporting Joaquin in his matches. He had a huge win. He beat the #1 seed. And being the bad influence I organized a junior tournament night out where in the middle of the tournament, I just bought a table at some Guatemalan club, and Joaquin came. And it was not good because we lost his brother. His brother like disappeared for a few hours. So we were freaking out, and Joaquin stayed up a little bit too late. And that equated to his parents freaking out and Joaquin losing the next round to an unseeded player in straight sets in the semifinals.
That's the inevitable byproduct, I suppose, of enjoying your life. But I'm sure if you ask Joaquin, he will remember the night out, or maybe he won't remember it, but he will think about it fondly, more so than just a random event he played. But yeah, again, you get to see this and you're immediately attracted to tennis, right? You're immediately going to a junior event. And I'm just curious, the level of tennis there being on the grounds there or in Monte Carlo or whatever it is. Does a tournament feel the same no matter where you are in the world?
No, it really doesn't. I mean, because when you're in a tournament, obviously, tennis tournaments it's so unique in its sense that every tournament has its own flair. But I mean, being in Monaco or being in Madagascar, now in Guatemala, everything is just so different. That tournament had a lot of Latin players from South America, from the islands, because, of its location. And it was very high quality, a lot of very good players, a lot of very good, future Division I tennis players, I would say. Who knows, maybe even professional player one day. It was a grade 4 tournament. So it was just, it was great to see some of my old friends, some familiar faces, and just to be back in that environment.
Yeah, no, I imagine it was awesome. I also know from reading your diary, there was a little bit of horseback riding. Are you proficient on a horse?
Proficient is generous. I can get up there. I hope. I don't know. It was all right. It was good. The horse was well tamed.
Well, that's all that matters. And again, that's got to be so cool for you. And I know from there, as you mentioned, this is where your South American journeys begin, because you go from Guatemala to Buenos Aires in Argentina. I do not know. I know, I don't think the event was going on, excuse me, but I'm sure that you had to, knowing you, go check out the sites in Buenos Aires. What was that like?
Yeah, it was a crazy day. So after the night out in Guatemala, obviously I had a little bit too much to drink, which happens from time to time. And I didn't want to tell the airport staff that, but I was visibly ill on the flight. It was 2 layovers. And they came up, and the person next to me was like, "I think he's like becoming unconscious." And I was like, oh, like, oh, just, like, I was like, I'm just a little bit ill. Like, I just haven't, been eating great. And I just would not tell them that I was insanely hungover from the night before. So they got like a bunch of ice packs and everyone was worried about me on the flight. But we get to Buenos Aires. I land at like 2 a.m. Alex is there. He meets me at the hotel. Went to a beautiful cemetery. And I said, you know what, we have to go check out the Buenos Aires Tennis Club, which is it's the oldest tennis club in South America, founded in the 1800s. So historic. Rafa Nadal has played there. Obviously Juan Martín del Potro. Don't know if he's played there, but that was, one of his home clubs in Buenos Aires from Tandil. And so we show up and we were not allowed to enter because they said only members, it's very exclusive. And I had a press pass because I used to write for Florida Tennis Magazine. I had an international press card that I would use for the European tournaments. So I pull out the press card and I said, actually, I'm not just a fan. Like, how dare you? I'm a tennis reporter. I'm here to cover your site. I'm here to write a feature story for, like, I think I might have said New York Times or something ridiculous. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Called up his manager. They opened the gates, welcomed up with his open arms, and we walked on to center court. And I said Alex was my photographer, and I was the writer. And it was a little bit of trickery on our end, but it got the job done.
Yeah. Hey, whatever. Yeah. I look. I impersonate Ben Rothenberg all the time. No one can tell the difference. No. That's awesome to hear, and I'm sure just being on the sites again, you compare that and Marrakesh and just all of these various different clubs. It's got to be fascinating to have that Rolodex and be able to say, hey, I remember them, or I can compare these sites. I've been there. I've seen them in person. I believe in the diary, by the way, you say Florida Tennis Magazine. Was what you go with for your impersonation. But hey, whatever gets the job done. And so, for you, again, you get on stadium court. And from there, I believe, you're just constantly on the move. You are not wasting any time. I believe from there, it's right to your next destination, correct?
Yeah, it was a rainy couple days. Actually, that was that was a great day in Buenos Aires. Poured, storm for 2 days. So we kind of stayed locked up for a couple days. Then from there, we went to Rio, to Brazil, and Copa America was on, which is the biggest football tournament in South America. So we booked some Craigslist tickets or Ticketmaster or whatever, met some guy in some sketchy parking lot, like after we left, right when I landed in Rio, really. We went straight from the airport to this like side street, picked up our tickets, and the next day was just nonstop sightseeing because we went to Christ the Redeemer, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. That was our second stop, Petra being the first. And we saw Sugarloaf Mountain, which is some of the most beautiful, some of the most beautiful views in the world. Just looking over Brazil's glistening water was pretty incredible. And from there, we went to the Copacabana Beach. And after that, we went to the Copa America game where Bolivia lost to Peru. We have our Peru jerseys. We'll show that picture as well. And just, the energy was electric. Normally I'm at tennis events, but, South Africa, I went to cricket. I saw the soccer events now in Brazil. And obviously I'm around tennis all the time. So sport is really a highlight of everywhere I go.
I'm sure, again, you are biased because you are inherently a tennis fan, but comparing the tennis crowds internationally, how a crowd differs in the different places you've seen events, and then, comparing those to the sorts of crowds that attend cricket, or as you mentioned, these events that you get to see in South America. How do the crowds differ at these various sports? How does an international crowd compare to, the crowd, say, at the Miami Open or wherever else you've been domestically?
Yeah, one of the things that I don't love about tennis sometimes is the Wimbledon. That's not my thing, that very quiet energy. I love Latin fans generally a little bit more boisterous, a little louder, as we see in Miami Open every year. And so that energy was greatly appreciated. I love seeing, their constant cheers and chants, and Alex and I got into it. And it was just a lot of fun, to see that patriotism that we don't really have so much in our sport, just because it's a little bit of a stigma to be, overly loud. And so it was great. I mean, from there we went, after watching the Peruvians win their match, we actually flew to Peru we went to Lima, and from Lima to Cusco, where we spent a day in Machu Picchu, which was great. We went, clubbing around this Cusco village, which is just a bunch of tourists who come to see Machu Picchu, and that was beautiful. That was our third of the seven wonders, ancient city. So it was a great time going from Brazil to Peru.
Yeah, and in part 3, we joked that, it's actually 74 flights because you went skydiving, and just because you weren't coming down on that flight doesn't mean you didn't take it. But it could have almost been 75 flights, right? Because after Peru, there was some charcuterie coming when you were attempting to make your way to Cuba.
Yeah, it was bad. We had so Alex got really sick in Peru. I don't know if he got some. I mean, we ate alpaca. That might have been it. I don't know what was it. But yeah, Alex was pretty sick. We leave Peru, which is freezing because it's so high in the mountains, and Brazil was so hot. So the weather change might have done it. I'm not sure. But we fly from Cusco to Lima, but our flight was delayed 2 hours. And Alex was pissed at me because I booked the flights because it was cheaper. He's like, why did you book such a small layover time with different airlines? I said, I didn't know. So we pretty much rush around the airport in Lima. We leave our bags. So we leave the airport without our bags. We go back in to a different airline, Avianca, and we said, look, we have a flight that leaves in 15 minutes. Like, has it closed? She said, you have 2 minutes. I didn't have a visa, so I had to fill out the visa thing. Just threw her cash pretty much because we didn't know how much it was. And they contacted Peruvian Airlines, but the way things work are not as organized as they are in the States. And they pretty much said, all right, you can get on the phone, you can get on this flight to Cuba, which is a communist country that I'm legally not even allowed to go to because the Trump administration banned pure tourism travel to Cuba without your suitcase. And you may or not see it. You may or may not see it the next day. And I said, Alex was like, all right, we just got to do it. Like, it's worth a shot. I kind of want to see Cuba. So we get on this flight, and my friend Sergio from Puerto Rico is playing an ITF in Cuba. So we go straight from there. We cleared customs easily because we didn't have any customs. We didn't have anything on us. So we get to the hotel, and I borrowed Sergio's clothes, which I think are a few sizes too small for Alex and I. We looked like it looked like a tank top on me and Alex, short shorts, but that's okay. And the next day I called them and I said, I spent hours on the phone. I said, look, my friend Alex is crying. Alex doesn't speak Spanish. I was speaking in Spanish. I said, he's crying all day. Please save him. And Alex, didn't know that I was just totally shitting on him, but that's okay. And we wound up picking up our bags, and I spent a day, cheering Sergio on, and it was a good time.
Mm-hmm. How was the ITF event in Havana? I imagine that was fun to see as well. Just to be, yeah. I mean, you're one of the few people who can say I stepped foot in Cuba.
It was a bit of a disaster getting there because we were coming from Cusco, Machu Picchu, and we flew into Lima with a different airline than we were flying from Lima and Havana. And I don't really like to do that too much, just in case you miss a flight and the other airlines don't rebook. But it didn't go so well. The flight was delayed 2 hours. I think we had 30 minutes before the next flight was leaving, and we actually left our bags. So we ran straight to the check-in, and we couldn't return to that baggage point. And the lady at the front gave us kind of an ultimatum, which is either you stay here in Lima, Peru with your bags, or you go to Havana without them, and we'll send them at some point later. And we decided to do that, which might not have been the best idea in retrospect, but we did it. We got on the flight. We get to Cuba, Havana, and we had almost no money. The Trump administration had just locked leisure travel into Cuba. And so we were technically there illegally, but the Cuban administration didn't really care about it. So we get to Cuba, we take a 1950s taxi into the city where the tournament is, because I was visiting a friend who was playing in the ITF junior tournament there. And yeah, it felt like a total dystopia. Everything was very weird. People were very scared to talk about the political situation. But it was a beautiful country at the same time. So very unique.
Yeah, and as you talk about the tennis you got to see, just describe, because junior facilities all over the world are so different. We talked about what it's like when you find a tennis court in Madagascar. We've talked about what it's like when you found tennis courts at professional facilities and how they differ. How does the junior scene look when you get to Havana?
Yeah, I mean, I always kind of talk about tennis transcending all economic political situations, and that held true in Cuba. And so the interesting thing was, there was Cuban wildcards that were there playing, and even though I wasn't playing in the tournament, I still got to hit with some of the, Cuban 14, 15, 16-year-old kids who played at a good level. So in that way, it was similar. But then, you have to look, it's very difficult for those players to get out of Cuba, and that really prevents them, I think, from playing at the potential, because economic, politically, visa wise, they can't really go to other ITF tournaments that easily.
I don't know if our super producer Wyatt can do this, but I'm just imagining this cartoon version of you like sleeping at the airport, being like, where am I going to go? Then the next thing you're doing, right, is you're kind of wandering up to the tennis facility. You're like, is this the place to be? Are we in the right location? You try to get a warm up in. And then, of course, I know, as you mentioned, there were some financial difficulties throughout the trip as well.
Yeah. Actually, I am first. So I was so tired because I had run through the airport and, flip flops, and we had just trekked Machu Picchu. I was exhausted. It had been a long, I think, 3 weeks at that point. And so the junior players at ITF tournaments get free massages. So I think I shaved, and I went to the front desk and said I was a player and I was having a back injury, and I was wondering if I could get some treatment. And so I got a nice 30-minute massage pro bono, which was great. But yeah, no, I mean, everything about that tournament I think that was also the last ITF junior tournament I went to. And so just to kind of combine the craziness of my travels, in winding up in Cuba with kind of the end of seeing my junior tennis experience, or at least watching it, was really unique. And my friend, he played, and he unfortunately lost his singles and his doubles, but again, was very cool to see all the kids out there.
Yeah, I mean, we all imagine our final stop being in Cuba, right? For our junior tennis careers. That's where we all end up going. So I'm sure that's something we can all relate to. But of course, for you, the journeys don't stop. As this tournament, as you mentioned, you are there watching your friend compete in an ITF event. But from there, the fun continues.
Yeah. So the last stop was Mexico City, which one of my best friends from the tennis academy, Santiago, he lives in Mexico City. So he hosted me for a few days, and that was a lot of fun. Less tennis. I think he was training a little bit because he plays college tennis, but took me out to a lot of the bars, a lot of the clubs. Wyatt can pull some of that stuff up. And yeah, it was just so good to kind of end the trip on such a positive note, meeting so many cool people.
Yeah, I always like to end this at the end of these parts of these episodes. You compare Cuba, Mexico City, this swing of your trip compared to the other stops you had been on. Again, we want to focus on the tennis, of course, as well. And you've talked about it a little bit, but just culturally and then, socially, economically, how did this stage compare to what we've talked about so far? And of course, as you mentioned, it always helps when we have such incredible photos, videos to include in this story. I will remind everyone you can read more details on this part of the journey in the memoir, which we have published on our website, crackedrackets.com. But again, just your final thoughts on this leg of your journey.
Yeah, I mean, obviously so interesting to see how tennis relates to the geographical and economic and political, situations wherever you are. And the same thing always holds true, which is I was able to make friends and make genuine connections with people, irregardless of where I was. And so being in Cuba and having that crazy experience, almost getting there with no bags and having to go to the airport the next day and try to beg the immigration officials to help us out, and, or being in Africa and playing at the federations there in Madagascar, or being in Asia or wherever I was, just being able to connect with people and both share that same love of tennis and pick up a racket and balls and hit, was always the highlight for me.
Had you played in that ITF event in Cuba, do you get Triple Crown? Do you go 0-3?
Yeah, I think I go 0-0. I think I lose every game in every set. I don't think my level was too high at that point. I think I lost to a 14-year-old. I think we played a practice set. So
Yeah, no. It turns out when you climb Machu Picchu, not the best training, I suppose, for tennis.